Well, I'm from Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, we can barely say hello in 6 minutes, much less in 18 seconds. But I've picked this slide about a famous movie quote from Cool Hand Luke from an older movie because today we're going to talk a little bit about some traditional values and some old-fashioned values and how they relate to some of our modern communication tools. Because in fact, we use many of these modern communication tools in rather poor ways that sometimes result in the failure of communication. And yes, if I wanted to be modern, I could have had the Twitter fail whale instead of the Paul Newman movie quote, but that's not quite who I am and the message I wanted to give to you. We talk so much about information overload, with email being the most common example, and yet all of us are incredible content communicators in a way that none of us were, or a few of us were, in the age before technology, before Twitter and email and Facebook enabled us to publish worldwide and globally. Clay Shirky said, this is your speed reading class, he said, it's not information overload, it's filter failure. He talks about how we can change society by the way we communicate. And if you don't believe that, you have nothing better to look at than the Arab Spring and the things that communication tools have done. But I would suggest we need both positive and negative filters. We need negative filters to keep out the spam, positive to bring in things we want to hear. Many of you have enjoyed conversations with each other today. I have some of my best friends here that I only get to see once a year and then I communicate with electronically. And yet when we're having these great pleasant conversations and we're having lots of fun talking with one another and we're visiting and what happens? We get the message, right? I'm really into you, but this buzzing device in my pocket is more important. I'm putting you on hold for a minute while I talk to whoever and whatever. Is that really the message we want to give in an interpersonal relationship? Think about what that says to people and think about our own interest. Is this a paying client or a potential client? And isn't really anybody in this room or anybody we meet a potential client or a potential referrer of clients? Do we want to give that message? Sorry, let me deal with my device. Just stand there. You'll never get this moment of your life back, but that's okay. What would Grandma do? Grandma would at the most look and hopefully get rid of the call, but she would apologize. She'd say, I'm sorry, just a second. She would maintain eye contact while she's talking very briefly on the phone, making sure that this is an emergency, I've got to handle it. They say NFL quarterbacks have a clock in their head, clicking, that they know when to get rid of the ball, whether they see anybody around them or not. And that's the way it needs to be. And I would suggest that Ignite Law and the 18-second limit is a pretty good idea on how long you should talk on a cell phone when somebody else is involved there. Because you're putting their life on hold and saying they're more important. And what's this with lawyers talking on their cell phones everywhere, talking about who they're going to fire and client confidentiality, like they have the Get Smart cone of silence over them, protecting their communications. Well, your communications are protected by law, but not from that lady sitting next to you on the train. And lawyers not returning phone calls. We hear that this is the greatest source of bar complaints. And why don't lawyers return phone calls? The fact of the matter is lawyers return phone calls. Our phones don't look like that. Our phones are some of the most used devices in our office. And yet, there's the challenge of the client perception because they know how to return phone calls. They don't know about the challenges we deal coming in with court with 18 phone calls to return before we have to see that client in 15 minutes. So discuss with your clients that that's one of your greatest challenges. Tell them it's hard. I get so many calls. I'm a courthouse lawyer. I'm gone a lot. Discuss office systems. Discuss your other communications. How do you want to talk? Do you want to talk by electronic? Would you only want paper? I want to give you regular status reports so you don't have to call me all the time wondering what's going on in your case, because I'm going to communicate to you proactively. Make sure they understand how this is going to work. You don't have to be Rube Goldberg to build a better client communication system. We spent a lot of time developing systems to handle the substantive work, and the 21st century is our opportunity to build systems to communicate with our clients, to produce satisfied clients who will be referrers of future business to us as lawyers. I'll tell you a retro way to distinguish yourself: handwritten thank you notes. Nobody does that anymore, and yet that is an artifact that is delivered to the person. They know you thought about them. They know you had it in your hand. Handwritten thank you notes are a retro idea that in this day of electronic communications will distinguish you. And who do I want to thank? People that bring me wheelbarrows full of money, right? And who would that be? People that refer me clients. People who refer me a good client and make me money deserve a handwritten thank you note, not a terse email to fill their overflowing inbox. Communication's a two-way street, folks. In our society, listening is really waiting for your turn to talk. We need to spend time listening to people, making eye contact, repeating to them what they say. You can read a lot on active listening. I'm going to tell you, it's a real skill. It's something we should work on. Grandma also says, watch your mouth. Not just inappropriate language, but language that clients can't comprehend and can't understand. Legalese, stuff that doesn't mean anything to them. Watch what you communicate with your clients, make sure they understand. That's one of your key goals in client communication. And then we have the 21st century deadly communication failure, right? Texting and driving. You may think it's okay for you to do that, but what about your kid that's in the car watching that? Don't text and drive. How's that for grandma's advice to a room of highly educated people? Go forth and communicate. Build systems to communicate with your clients, make personal contacts, and they will reward you in the future with lots of referrals. Thank you very much, folks.